Hello friends, Tanya here for Spellbinders, and today we're going to play with the January 23 clear stamp and die. This is the Hydrangea Bouquet stamp and die set, and we're going to use the embossing folder of the month. We're also going to pull in the Home Sweet Quilt series that I used recently. If you want to see that, check in my previous videos. I am starting out with the largest stamp from the stamp set in my little mini Misty here with a, I think this is a 3-inch square of watercolor paper and some clear embossing ink. I've got some gold embossing powder that we're going to use to emboss this design on our piece of watercolor paper. This is Canson XL watercolor paper, 140-pound cold press. It's pretty inexpensive, easily obtained, and it works very well for many different applications. Here I'm heat setting that gold embossing powder, and I love the crispness of this stamp set. I will say that the quality of the Spellbinders clear stamps is very good. I love these stamps. They stamp nice and crisp. They have a nice deep etching and they clean up very nicely. They feel nice and sturdy. I love that. Some of the less expensive stamps, clear stamps, can be kind of delicate. You feel like when you're pulling them off the sheets, they might tear, but these are fantastic. Now I've taken the smaller flower grouping from this stamp set and I've stamped it several times on this 3x6-inch piece of watercolor cardstock. Now I just used a plain old block. Sometimes it's faster to do that. And it turns out my embossing ink pad was juicy enough for that to be very effective with a single stamping for each of those. I did not need to double stamp them like I do with my Misty. That is something I just do out of habit, because if once is good, twice is better, I guess. It's not always true, but I do it a lot. Now I have used the large grouping and the small grouping of flowers on both the 3-inch square and the 3x6-inch pieces. And now I'm taking some Distress ink cubes, and this is Shaded Lilac, Victorian Velvet, Scattered Straw, and Bundled Sage that I'm using here. I just wanted a soft but vibrant, doesn't that sound funny? Soft but vibrant grouping of colors. And I don't think these necessarily look vintage, but they're a pastel-y version. And since I use Distress inks, they're going to be bolder than if I use the Distress oxides. Now I just took some mini Distress inkers. These have been around forever, and I have one for every color in both the Distress inks and in the Distress oxide. So I just can pull them right out and use them and not have to worry about finding handles or cleaning them or anything like that. Now that I have inked and spritzed this with some water, I am going to take this hexagon die, and I'm using the embossing sandwich for a die. So, and then I ran that through my my platinum, and it isn't quite as deep as I would like. I do go back and cut this out with the coordinating larger outline die, and then I run it through with another shim, and I get the deeper impression that I was looking for. Next, I'm going to try this same technique, the same look with a different technique. First, I'm going to die cut and emboss this with that extra shim. And it actually looks pretty cool just on the watercolor paper without any inking. Now that I have the embossing and the die cut done, I'm going to go back and do my ink blending over the top. Now this will add more dimension to this because the ink doesn't necessarily get into all of the nooks and crannies of the embossing, which is perfect. I actually am quite pleased with the way this turned out. And I would be my preferred method to get this look. I have ink blended all the way down the panel, and now I'm spritzing it with a fine mist spritzer. That's actually for fake spray tan. I got it at Target. I think it was like $10. I will try to link it in the description box below, but I don't know, no guarantees. I'm drying this with my heat tool because I'm not very patient. And since this is watercolor paper, it is designed to handle all of the water and the heat that I'm applying. And it doesn't really warp. Now, if you used regular cardstock, it would warp and you would have a lot more problems with it. So watercolor paper really does pay off sometimes. Okay, now on to my next technique. I'm going to do some ink smushing. I'm taking each of these Distress ink cubes and smushing it on a piece of packaging. And then I spritzed the ink, and I think I spritzed the cardstock. Yep. And now I'm taking the different corners and trying to dab them back into the coordinating areas. And I'm using my rag here to dab off some of the extra ink. Now I'm not completely satisfied with this. I'm going to wipe away that ink off of my packaging and re-smush some ink, and I'm just going to do one color at a time. Now to set the colors that I already have on the watercolor paper, I do use my heat tool to dry that nicely. Next, I'm going to add a little spritz just to the ink that I've smushed onto my packaging and dab the corner of my cardstock that already had some of this purple in it. I believe that's the shaded lilac. Now I'm going to dry that edge, and I did dab off some of the extra liquid, and then when it's dry I'll add a little more of that color, and I'll keep doing that until I am happy with the look that I have there. Now I'm going to switch colors, and this is the that's the scattered straw, and I'm going to dab that corner in and dry it and dab again and dry again. And I did speed this up considerably. I believe this is at 4 times its normal speed. I think maybe it's only double. Anyway, now that I have done the yellow and the purple, I'm happy with how that looks. Actually, I think I went back and I used the green and the pink also. Now I'm going to die cut out that solid shape, and I'm going to emboss the details. And now we're going to do the embossing and the die cutting first on this panel. Just like the previous two, I'm using different methods for each piece to see which one I enjoy the most. And so far, I'm really liking the die cut and emboss first versus second. Now I'm going to do the same method of dabbing the color on repeatedly and drying between applications. I did find that I overheated this image a little much. I honestly don't think I overheated it. I think I didn't wait enough time between dabbing and applying heat, because there is embossing powder on here, and you do run the risk of melting your embossing powder again and then dabbing some of the melted embossing powder onto your packaging. That did happen a couple of times to me, and you also run the risk of melting that embossing powder so much that it soaks right into your paper. Now your chances are better on watercolor paper that you won't do that, but I did end up having some of the embossing powder stick to my packaging here. It still looks gorgeous. These pieces still show the pattern with the embossing. It's just not as raised. And with all of the things going on this panel, it actually doesn't really make a big difference, but it really could have. And I'm glad that when I noticed I was doing that, I slowed down in my dipping efforts and I changed tack in my strategy. I just have one color left here. It's the scattered straw, and I'm still doing the dab, dry, dab, repeat pattern again. and I still wanted a little more color. So after I've finished dabbing and drying alternately several times, I'm going to clean up my mess and move on to another way to apply your ink. Now I've already heat embossed this, I've already dry embossed this, I've already dabbed on it. Now I'm going to take each of those ink blenders and add a little more color over the top of the ink smooshing. Now it doesn't completely take away the pattern of the ink smushing, it just deepens the color each spot. So if you are working on some ink smushing and you just want a little more intensity of color, you could certainly go back, especially with the distress inks, and add a little more. Now here are the Postage edge dies in the square, and we're going to pull out the Stylized Trellis, which is the embossing folder of the month this month. I've die cut our piece and then I embossed each of them with the Stylized Trellis, and I'm going to add those as a background here. The embossing on that panel reminds me of the machine quilting that you can do on your own if you have a long arm quilting machine. Or you can hire it out, or if you're really lucky, you have a friend who has a long arm quilting machine. Myself, I have never done that kind of quilting. Here is my gift card insert piece. Now this was from a die of the month from a couple of years ago. It made a cute little gift bag style gift card holder, and this was included in that die set, and I've hung on to it. I did not keep this with the die set. I have it just on a magnet sitting next to my die cut machine so that I can use it whenever I'd like. It really holds a gift card very easily. Now to assemble these, I put a gift card in these gift card holder tabs before I started hearing, because this is going to be behind the front of the card. It's going to be on the flap when you turn it up or when you open it to the side. It's going to be where on the part of the card that you don't typically see immediately. So I adhere that top piece over the top, and then I move on to the next card and I move that gift card, and the whole goal of sticking that gift card in there while I'm adhering or assembling the card is so that I don't glue the tabs down on the back of the card front. I would hate to have gone to the work of putting those tabs in there and then have them adhered to the card front because I wasn't being careful. And ultimately, I did pull out another card-sized or gift card-sized piece. It happens to be one of the little reference cards that I have hanging on my name tag for work. But whatever will work best, you don't have to use a gift card. There is like a magnetic strip for a card reader on this particular gift card, and if it was still an active one, that could potentially cause some problems. So I'm assembling all 4 of these cards, and then I'm going to add a sentiment. Now I took another stamp from the Hydrangea Bunch stamp set, and I'm repeatedly stamping it with some embossing ink, Watermark and embossing ink. And then I will go back and gold heat emboss that. I did just use my Misty here, and I did not have to double stamp any of these, I don't think. I am using my anti-static powder tool, which for me is an old sock with some cornstarch in it and a little bulldog clip on the top to keep it closed. You do not have to spend money on that. I bet you have old socks and cornstarch in your house already. Just using some gold embossing powder. This is again from Hero Arts. That's what I have in my stash. And embossing powder lasts and lasts and lasts. And gold is one of those constant. It never goes out of style. Now you can see that I have stamped at least one extra. The first one I stamped, the embossing ink had already started to dry. It's winter here in Minnesota and the air is very dry here. So I find that my embossing ink will dry much faster in this time of year than it does in the summer. There is a coordinating die set for the hydrangea bouquet, or is it hydrangea bunch? Anyway, the Stamp and Die of the Month kit, and it has both flower bunches and the sentiment Hello Friend. Now I'm going to die cut each of these embossed Hello Friends, and I do ultimately end up cutting out some cardstock scraps with the same die to add a little extra height for some of these cards. Now I try it on the first one without any extra height, and it does work. You can see it quite easily, but I really like that extra dimension. So I'm going to add the extra layers behind the next 3 Hello Friend sentiments. It doesn't have to be fancy cardstock. I do like to try to use the same color cardstock that the main body of that sentiment is cut out of. It just creates a more cohesive look, but sometimes it's just whatever scrap cardstock I have, mostly white. I'm going to adhere the next one, and I just look at each design and look where there's a good spot to put the sentiment. I am using a heavy block to put on top of those to let them dry a little better. Next, I'm going to take another sentiment from that stamp set, and this works for a thank you very well, which is what I'm going to use these cards for. I'm going to use them to give gift cards to different people I encounter through traveling and through different parts of my life. So I'm going to add this sentiment with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. I'm going to put it near the top so I can add a personal message below that sentiment. I'm going to stamp that inside each of our 4 cards here. And then after I'm finished with those, I have another element I'm going to stamp inside. I thought that this You Brighten My Day was a great sentiment for these very general cards. You could give this as just an encouragement card, but you could also give them to just about anyone to brighten their day. Next, I'm taking the large bunch and the small bunch of flowers, and I'm going to use some Scattered Straw Distress Oxide ink because it just stamps better. So I go grab that ink from my stash. I just used the Distress ink because I'm not going to worry too much about it. I'm just going to stamp them on the insides of the cards. I'm looking for the best placement for each of these. I do want them to overlap the sentiment a little bit. I want them to add to the inside design, bringing the design from the outside to the inside of the card. And I want to be able to still write over the top of them. I'm going to add the small bunch of flowers near the top and near the bottom of this inside of the card. And then for the big bunch, I do rub this ink pad all over the stamp, but that tends to give me some little strings. So sometimes that's not always the best idea. Just make sure you're picking those off before you try to stamp. And I'm going to stamp those inside the card also. I do like that this is such a big stamp. It covers a lot of area, and you don't have to use the entire image, and you don't have to center it. Just find a place that looks good to you. There are my 4 cards. I really had fun playing with different techniques and different looks to make these cards. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel so you can see all of the videos that I create. If you're interested in any of the products I used today, as always, they are listed and linked in the description box below. Here are a couple more videos I thought you might enjoy. Until next time, bye-bye.